Okay. Where is Pam?
Uh, I don't know.
Okay. He's
I
not
mean,
here.
I saw good to
Oh,
record. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, just saw it. Great. Excellent. How was your show?
Oh, it's good. We got a little bit of National Liberty Alliance in there, a little bit of talk on how to grieve, and wrapped it up with Trump.
Busy 2 hours.
Yeah, yeah, it's always fun, and it's. I look forward to listening to your show, so I'll be getting off and listening.
All right. And I know, okay. Yeah. And Brady is going to be coming on pretty soon. So I don't know what happened to my virtual background. I had some, and it was there last week. I wonder what happened to him.
I don't know.
Because I'm not that techie.
Yeah. Well, the big thing is we can hear you, right?
Much better than seeing me. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, at least I'm blurred out, so we'll go with that.
All right.
Anyway, well, I'll take it from here. Thank you
Thank you.
for, all right. You be safe and well. I think I'm recording. So, Alan Myers here. I am. This is another episode of For the Republic. Welcome, everyone. In a little bit, because Brady's running late and Dougie's hunting the best snow cone in California, apparently again. I will begin with, of course, Wackadoodle News. Some of this I wanted Brady to be with, but we will continue. And yes, there's always a load of Wackadoodle News out there. Most people have heard of World Economic Forum, and they had their recent meeting in Davos, Switzerland. Nice little ski resort place to have a big event. And they actually issued a report, the 2024 Global Risk Report. And this is coming from the elite experts. And they have declared what the number one threat to humanity is. Are you ready? It's not terrorism, pandemic, climate change. Nope. It's misinformation and disinformation. And the only hope for humanity, of course, is censorship and speech control. That's scary. That's really scary. Instead of saying what we need to have, if two people disagree, and we're going to get into this later with Brady, if you got two people disagreeing, instead of yelling, screaming, name calling, finger pointing, just put the facts on the table, or what you think the facts are on the table. Ask questions, listen to answers, be asked questions, give answers. Let people figure out what really is correct, what is not. But this anti-free speech is really being pushed, and they want to support censorship to combat what one person called the infodemic, because this really, I mean, too much free speech is just too much. Wow. And I'll tell you how what our founders said, and you're all going to know this. It's the First Amendment, and there's a reason why they put it in there and why it became the first one, because it's that important. Now, people think, or sometimes people refer to the First Amendment as free speech. That's only part of it. There's five things in the First Amendment that are being protected. And I'll give them to you. Here we go. This is a very, very short amendment, by the way. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Remember, these are directions to the federal government, Congress, the legislative branch. These are restrictions being put on the federal government. No law respecting an establishment of religion. We have freedom of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, freedom to speak, or of the press to write about it, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble. Yeah, we can come together. And here's the big one, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. If you think the government isn't doing what it's supposed to do, you get to let them know you're not happy. You get to let them know that you're going to complain. And apparently, this is part of the problem of this freedom of speech, this freedom to express. Let's talk about some things that have been out there that now have been turned around. For example, a recent scientific review by 12 researchers from leading universities, this is according to an article I read, they found little support for the claims that masks reduced COVID exposures. But that was, first it was nothing, and then it had to be everything. Think about what it did to people. Think about what it did to children. Think about what it did to education. Now, it is said that many countries did not close their schools, and they did not experience an increase in COVID. However, we are now facing an alarming drop in testing scores, an alarming rise in medical illness among the young, where they did follow the rules. Thing is that we are meant to be free, not free to hurt, but free to live. And we're meant to exercise our own innate abilities to think, to question, to act, to give back, to share, to be part of. We don't need this for government. It's not government's business. And I believe when the Constitution was written, this is exactly what they were after. A limited federal government. That's what the states wanted, because that's who created the federal government. The representatives of at that time, the 13 states. Because 13 states eventually signed off on the Constitution. They didn't want to give up their sovereignty. They didn't want to give up their independence. The federal government was created to do things for the 13 states, for the rest of the world, not tell them how to live. Keep that in mind. Wish Brady was here. I'd really like to have his feedback. He might be here in 5 minutes. I will continue. Actually, I'm going to skip this one for a minute because I definitely want Brady to comment on this. Now, did you notice that? Yeah, we're going to talk about climate again. Way back in the day, in the 70s, it was the next coming ice age. The 90s, it was global warming. Now it's climate change. Well, and we're getting too warm and we've got too many greenhouse gases, on and on and on. Well, apparently in the Chicago area, the Tesla charging stations, as the article says, was lined with dead cars and freezing cold. Basically, a bunch of dead robots. What happened is it got really, really cold in Chicago and other areas. Well, this is kind of what happens in the winter. And these batteries don't charge very well or at all when they're frozen. And some people would leave their car, hoped it would get charged. They come back, nothing. And there were, of course, long lines because the cars that were hopefully being charged were abandoned. Charging station after charging station. Now, there are reports out of Norway that they don't have these problems. Well, they have a lot of electric charging places. And some people, well, they charge their cars at home and their garages are heated. So the battery stays warm. Many, many, many years ago, I was in Norway. I was in Sweden, Denmark, met people, learned about it. Back then, when you had gasoline powered cars, and if you went to some place, well, grocery store, movie theater, whatever, and you're going to be in for a while, and it's the wintertime, what did you do? You plugged your gasoline car in, and the block had a heater on it to keep it warm, because otherwise, when you came out, it wouldn't start. They're used to dealing with these really, really cold temperatures for a really long time. So you have, according to one person, if you've got these cars, you have to precondition the battery, meaning you have to get the battery up to the optimal temperature to accept a fast charge. I don't know what that temperature is, but apparently it is more than freezing. So be aware. Let's see. Oh, these are fun. These are fun. I call them quotes. Thanks for being here, everybody. And I can't wait till Brady gets here so he can start commenting. And of course, check the chat. This is a list of quotes or comments about certain people who would be in the news. First one is Chuck Schumer. Apparently, this is more of a comment than a quote. He refused to do anything to protect our border unless Congress agrees to give money to Ukraine to protect their border. Wouldn't you think somebody would want to protect our border first? I would. Now you have a freshman congressman from Florida, Maxwell Frost, and he has proposed to tear down the Statue of Liberty because it's offensive to illegals. Really? Statue of Liberty, gift from France. This is offensive? I can't imagine why. Klaus Schwab, I'm no fan of his. He's the guy that runs the World Economic Forum. He's the guy who took the position that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Now, I don't know who he checked in with that, but when they say you own nothing, that's exactly what they mean. You won't own a home, you won't own a car, you won't even own your phone. Everything will be rented, but you'll be happy. Maybe they've redefined happiness. Klaus has proposed an end to silly things like, again, according to this article, silly things like elections. AI will be able to predict the results much easier, cheaper, and faster. So let's go with AI for our elections. We don't need to actually cast a vote. Crazy. The UN. No. Oh, Washington Post. Washington Post is claiming that here it is, because this is part of free speech, self-education. That is doing your own research on issues. This is what the Washington Post, or WAPO, claims. Doing your own research on issues is dangerous. After all, you may learn something that does not blend with the approved narrative if you actually read all the facts. Now, I called the approved narrative the common accepted narrative. That's right. Just drink from the can and you'll be fine. You don't have to think. You don't have to study. You just have to listen and follow. Crazy stuff out there. This isn't crazy, but it's not funny. It's sad. Denver's having a problem. That's Denver, Colorado. The largest healthcare center in Denver is in a financial bind. Apparently they're out $136 million for providing care to illegals who paid nothing. That's a long way from the border, the southern border. It's crazy. Next up, you know Hunter Biden, and apparently he is an artist. Well, somebody named Kevin Morris purchased about half of his art and gave Hunter $5 million apparently to pay for his back taxes and personal expenses. Why? Okay, last one. This man was, I think he was in the House, Jamal Bowman. He's the guy who pulled the fire alarm, and said he mistook the fire alarm for a door opener. I've never seen a door opener look like a fire alarm. And usually door openers are things that you push button, not pull a handle. He now claims that the US actually owes, according to this article, $14 trillion as reparation to those people of color who are actually no longer oppressed by the Democrats as a matter of policy. 14 trillion? I've discussed this before, and 1 trillion, the number is 1 followed by 12 zeros. Write that down. 1 followed by 12 zeros. That's crazy. There's also 1,000 billion. Well, I'm a numbers guy and that doesn't work for me. So I calculated 1 trillion into seconds, inches, and miles. He says these people are owed 14 trillion. 1 trillion seconds is 31,709 years. We ain't gonna live that long. That's 1 trillion. 1 trillion inches, 633 times around the earth at the equator. You ain't gonna walk that in a lifetime. And finally, you wanna get that trillion-mile frequent flyer card? 107 round trips from Earth to Pluto and back. That's 1 trillion. These people are talking in multitudes of trillions, like our national debt at 34 trillion. It is absolutely insane. All right. Let's see. I think I did. Did I do this one? Well, Brady's late. I was counting on him, so I may have to find something else to do, but I'll keep going. Thanks for being here. As I mentioned earlier, World Economic Forum had a little party in Davos, Switzerland, and they invited this person to come speak. He's Argentina's new president. I don't know if they knew what they were about to get, but they got it. This man, new president of Argentina, former economics professor, and he made no attempt to pacify his audience in any way, shape, or form. Nope. He basically just went after him. He took the position that this group, they love this supranational institutions. They don't like sovereignty. They see sovereignty as dangerous. They want a world run by sensible, educated, moderate sorts like themselves, with minimal interference from national electorates, basically countries. No. That is the one world order. It would be the worst thing ever. His name, I can't pronounce his name. Milei. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce. He said that a great many of the prevalent ideologies in Western countries are variants check this out, are variants of collectivism, whether they're called communist, fascist, socialist, social democratic, Christian democratic, progressive, or populist. Collectivism, communism. And they always lead to failure. Always lead to failure. He is not for that. These are the kind of people you need to elect to get behind. And he is being attacked in Argentina because he wants to have, and this is coming from the president, he wants to have less control, which basically has mobilized the establishment against him because they don't want to surrender their privileges or their power. This is what he wants to give up at the federal level. He wants to give up the power to set prices, incomes, and rents, to in-state ownership of commercial companies, to allow foreign airlines to compete on Argentine routes, to scrap tariffs, export controls, to cut taxes, and this one I really like, to abolish the central bank. That is fantastic. And finally, he basically apparently is a libertarian, and he follows libertarianism. And what they say is that that libertarianism is that our leaders should behave like the rest of us. That the fact of being in government, even in a democracy, that's a 4-letter word here, should not give those people in government a pass to do things which are immoral in every other context, such as to expropriate or coerce others. That is, so again, hoping Brady shows up. If not, I'm going to have to figure out something to do. He's now 10 minutes late. I might send him a message and ask, where are you? Hold on a second, because he sent me. All right, I'm going to tell you a little story. And Brady and I were going to get into this because he likes to talk about the method. I was at an event recently, a bunch of family people, families we've known for a long time. And one person there is a retired AP history teacher. Very, very knowledgeable, very bright. And they were talking about the elections and what was coming. And I chimed in because I've written an article and I said that, well, Nikki Haley's not a natural born citizen. And he kind of laughed, he kind of scoffed and goes, what? I went through the explanation, which we've had on the show before, which is, well, neither parent was a US citizen at the time of her birth, and being a natural born citizen, well, it's not the place until your parents are. And I'll have to pull it out, his smartiness, he said none of that mattered because of the 14th Amendment. Need the glasses to read, sorry. And the whole idea with the 14th Amendment is that, I can't find it, well, is that you get to be, you're a citizen. Well, being a citizen is not the same as a natural born citizen. And the reason that becomes such a big deal is because of Article 2, Section 5, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. And I'm going to read it This is what you have to have. This is what you have to be eligible for the office of president in the United States. No person except a natural-born citizen. Think about that. This is the opening few words. No person except a natural-born person, natural-born citizen, or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. So what came first was natural-born citizen. Then citizen at the time of the adoption of the Constitution. Well, right now, no one is alive today that was a citizen at the time of the adoption. So you've got to be a natural-born citizen. A natural-born citizen was so important, they put it first in this. Then to be eligible, you have to be 35 years of age, and you've had to be 14 years resident within the United States. Last two are pretty easy. So what's a natural-born citizen? Well, a natural-born citizen is whatever it meant then is what it means today. So what did it mean then? You have to go back to a source document for that, which is Emmerich de Vital's The Law of Nations. Chapter 19, Section 212. In it, he defines a natural-born citizen. And the upshot of it is, and I've written an article about it, the upshot of it is that a natural-born citizen, remember, think about it, this was written in 1758, French, here he comes. And in 1760, I'll be with you. You're here.
I am. Apologize for my tardiness.
Well, we'll beat you later. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Let me get my background set up. There we go.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to mine. It was there before, now it's gone. But anyway, I'm going to finish my thought and then we'll bring you into where we're at. And I'm revisiting a moment I had with somebody I've known for a long time, retired AP history teacher, and he disagreed with me when I said that Nikki Haley was not eligible to be president because she's not a natural-born citizen. And I was explaining to the audience, thank you, audience, for listening, that you have to go to de Vital's The Law of Nations, and there he talks about it. And given that when it was written, 1758, it is known that 2 or 3 copies of de Vital's Law of Nations was at the convention. His name and his works were mentioned many times in debates, in ratification conventions. So they knew who he was. Now, I've talked about this before. The upshot is, I said to this gentleman, well, being a citizen and being a natural-born citizen, not the same thing. He wouldn't listen. But his comment was, and I didn't have time to find it exactly because I hadn't highlighted it. His comment was the 14th Amendment. And I'm thinking, okay, he's talking about 14th Amendment. I take Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. Okay, fine. That doesn't make them a natural-born citizen. It just makes them a citizen. And you've got people equating being a citizen with being a natural-born citizen. Brady, what do you think? Are they the same?
They are not, and they're specifically not, and it had everything to do with the fact that there were so many British loyalists that were still in the colonies, even after the Revolution, that we had to have some serious concerns about loyalty. This was a security concern.
Exactly.
Their intent is crystal clear.
The other thing is, think about this for a moment. Let's say your family comes from another country. Your parents never naturalize. They don't intend to, but they come from big money, okay? And they get you born on U.S. soil. And the goal is that you are going to become president. You will not be loyal to the United States because you're not raised to be loyal to the United States. You're raised to be loyal to the other country. Does that make sense so far?
It does.
So why would you want somebody at the highest office who potentially, just because not who their parents are, but where the ground they were born on, gets them to be the number one elected official in the country? No. So the thing about the 14th Amendment is born or naturalized in the United States. Okay, born and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Well, just because you're born here, does that make you subject to the jurisdiction? I don't think so. What do you think, Brady?
Well, I didn't hear how you led into this, so if I'm being
Oh,
redundant, cut
okay.
cut me off. But what I
No, go
find
ahead. Go ahead.
I find interesting is how everything you're saying ties into the current question of whether Trump can be on the ballot, and according to the 14th Amendment, Section 3. And they worded it specifically about presidential electors or vice presidential electors. And they
We're
named
going to
Trump.
get into that. We're going to get
Okay.
into that. Let's stick with Section 1.
Okay.
And that is, okay, just because you're born here, why would that make you eligible? I mean, did the 14th Amendment amend the natural born citizen section of Article 2? I don't think so.
Well, nor was it ever intended to.
The thing to me is that just because you're born here does not mean that you are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Because you're subject to your parents. And just because you're born here and your parents' allegiance is to another country, you're not subject to the jurisdiction here. That's my take on it. To me, the 14th Amendment did not amend the meaning of natural born citizen. Any more thoughts on that?
No, keep going with your train of thought, and I'll jump in when
Okay.
you deem it appropriate.
Well, the reason I brought this up is because, and you and I spoken about this a bit, is that man I know, basically said I was wrong and didn't want to have a conversation. And we talked about this, and I thought, okay, well, I need to improve, and we can share this with everybody. I need to improve my knowledge and abilities on how to engage someone peacefully. Does that make sense?
Fair enough.
Okay. And you mentioned the Socratic method. Well, I had to look this up a little bit. I'd heard the term, but I never really thought about it. And apparently there's 3 steps in the Socratic method. First, you give an initial definition or opinion, statement. Ask a question that raises an exception to the definition or opinion, and then give a better one. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, really, in a nutshell, it's asking leading questions and listening. People will quite often talk themselves into the answer you want them to.
And then apparently there are 5 types of Socratic questions. Why do you say that? What do you mean? How does this relate to our discussion? What do you think is the main issue? Could you expand upon that point further? To me, the whole purpose is about having conversations, not arguments, not debates, not yelling, screaming, name calling, finger pointing, just having a discussion. But I have learned that when you're talking with someone and you ask them a question or you invite an answer or response, and the invitation is, do you want to discuss this? And you get a no, I guess I could begin with, why do you say that? Your
You know, it's
thoughts, your thoughts.
well, yeah, I've tried to employ Socratic questioning quite a bit over the last, I don't know, 8, 10 years. Uh, we call it red pilling in these parts, and I've had some pretty good results over the years, and I've been practicing the method, and it sort of comes like second nature. I don't think it through anymore, but I've got a fun example of it.
Please do.
Yeah, my sister, who I've spoken about a few times, I do love my sister. I don't always like her. Um, she is basically gets all of her news from public radio, and
Oh, from the experts?
oh yeah, yeah, she's an NPR fiend. Thinks everything they say is going to be correct. Um, and I mean, really about as brainwashed as it comes for an intelligent person. But we're over there a couple years ago for my niece's high school graduation, and she's bragging to a group of about 5 or 6 people in a room that within a year or two, her entire house is going to be carbon neutral. And she goes through everything she's going to do. And I looked at her, I said, "Okay, that's great. Why?" She could not answer the question. And we just went through it with one word questions, and she basically spun herself into the point where she actually had to leave the room. And you can do that. You don't really want people to have to leave the room. That's not the goal.
Right.
But you absolutely, by asking instead of arguing with someone, have them explain their position.
Yeah.
And it really, you can watch people talk themselves out of their previous opinion. And I think it's really valuable.
Did she talk herself out of her opinion, or she just left the room?
Well, yes, she hit the point where she realized she was so frustrated and that she stormed out. And apparently, I had said something wrong by asking her to explain her rationale. So you'll get those.
The gentleman I was talking about also later asked me about if I'm okay with taking down the Confederate statues in other parts of the country. My first response is, well, it's in another state. It's none of my business. He didn't like that answer. Don't you have an opinion? It's like, it's not for, and to me, it's not for me to have an opinion because it doesn't affect me. I kind of have an idea of what happened and who did what. But he kept pushing and pushing and pushing. What would your answer be to that, Brady?
Do I have an opinion? I usually do.
Yeah. What's your opinion about taking down the statues?
Oh,
Statues.
I've got a real strong opinion. Don't erase history. History is something to be told as accurately as possible so we can learn from the good and the bad. And, that's Marxist philosophy 101. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. Well, that's what they're doing is they're trying to erase the past. And that's not okay. We ought to, it's pretty annoying when it comes to the Arlington Memorial because, and I really wish I could remember the guy's name. There was a Republican who had the ability to vote no on the Armed Service Committee.
Uh-huh.
But he said yes, he gave it the go ahead. And for that, he got a bunch of government military contracts in his district. So he was bribed out of doing the right thing. If you really want to get some really good in-depth knowledge of what's going on with the taking down of the monuments, I would recommend anybody go to the Abbeville Institute. And they're all about all about conserving the Southern tradition and why it's so important in this country. And the monuments are a big deal. You can't erase the past. And,
Well, you can try.
well,
But
my point being, it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
It leads to very bad outcomes because now they get to rewrite the past.
Yeah, I wanted to see how we wanted to play it out, so I didn't ask. I think in the future I would be more interactive and ask questions of the other person. Say, what do you think? And tell me why you think this way. Because they were put up. When they were put up, why they were put up, I don't know. But in a way, they could actually be considered conversation starters. Who was this person? Why did they build a statue to this person? What did this person do? Am I supportive of that, of what was done, or am I not supportive? They're conversation starters. Would you agree?
I think I would.
Okay. Let's see what else. Well, you missed all the wackadoodle news. Too bad about that.
Was it wackadoodle enough?
I talked about the World Economic Forum.
Oh, my favorite, my heroes.
Yeah. And I had a little thing about EVs in Chicago.
Hmm.
They're not charging very well in the very cold weather.
Yeah, I have heard this.
The Argentine president was at Davos.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on Davos if you want to talk about it a bit.
Well, I already have, so bring it.
Well, the big takeaway is there were several people who actually went up there in front of all the globalists and told them they were flat out wrong. But the one that really I enjoyed the most, and I'm not sure if he was at Davos or just being interviewed about Davos,
Mm-hmm.
was the CEO of Chase, JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon.
Lemon.
Did you mention that at all?
No.
Well, he basically went up to, and he was being interviewed with what's his name, Joe. Oh, come on, morning. You know the guy I'm talking about, the morning Mika guy.
Yeah. Keep going.
Anyways, he's it's an interview on a big stage. I thought it was at Davos. I could be wrong, but he basically talked about Trump's policies. And
Okay.
he's out there on what is it, MSNBC saying, look, Trump was right about immigration. He was right about the economy. He was right about, and he nailed like five things in a row. And Joe, what's his name? It could just nod his head along. And but you didn't expect to hear it on that platform, and you certainly didn't expect people to speak truth to power at Davos. And so I thought that was a little refreshing. And it's usually a bunch of people, all these elites, basically agreeing with each other. But apparently we had a little bit of pushback this year, which is nice. And that includes Malou, however we're saying the president of Argentina's name.
Yeah, I spelled it. I didn't pronounce it.
Yeah, I'm going with that's Joe Scarborough. Thank you very much, Bill West. Nice try, D. Landry. You got it wrong.
Anything in chat before we continue?
A couple things. There was someone posted a really good link to the Socratic method. Nice little cheat sheet. I'm looking at that right now.
Okay.
Just talking about the trivium method and logical fallacies. That's actually y'all should read about that stuff, because if you're going to debate or even discuss, and I love it, Alan, that you make it a discussion and not a debate. You've hit me over the head with that a few times, and you're correct. If you're going to have these discussions about people who have strong opinions, stuff like that, learn the tricks. You don't have to go to forensics class or join a debate team to have these conversations with people and actually get them to think, hey, maybe my opinion is not as well formed that I ought to think about it, or there may be some other inputs to consider. And that's all you're really trying to do, is get people to question.
For me, I'm trying to learn this. I'm working at learning this. It's an art more than a science, because each person is going to bring something slightly different to the event. And it's about keeping tempers calm, being focused on the sharing of information, not attacking, inquiring. But the thing in kind of, maybe this is in part what you encountered with your sister, is that you were just inquiring. And at a certain point, your questions were overwhelming. And she didn't have the willingness or ability or whatever to reply, so she got overwhelmed. And which we don't want that, but it's not always possible to not do that. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I thought I had any chance of changing her mind. So I actually when she storms out of the room, I have gotten the desired result. But that's sibling rivalry for you. It's not going to go
away. Okay. Within the family, you just have at it. With people outside the family, it's learning to encourage the conversation. And what I take on what I study and what I speak about, I'm a student. I want to learn. Help me learn. Please answer my questions.
That's,
I don't see how that can be threatening.
well, that's one of the, yeah, that's one of the things I tell people all the time, and I think I'm being authentic when I say it, but I love being wrong. It means I learned something new. Prove me wrong. Tell me where I'm wrong, and I'm open to it. Because like you, I'm a student of life. I want to learn more every day. You know, and I don't know everything yet.
You don't?
I don't.
Doug
Nope.
didn't tell me that.
Yeah, well, there's a
Gee,
few areas
okay.
where I've got a few more courses to take, but I'll get there.
That leads into, again, I'll take positions. I'll support, defend, explain. But because I am a student, all you have to do is answer 4 questions to help me learn. Just 4, simple. What have I said that's wrong? Why is it wrong? What's correct? Why is it correct? Just answer the questions. Help me out because I want to learn. Doesn't happen. But as long as we're cool, calm, not threatening, not arrogant, inquisitive, we help promote the ability to exchange information. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and it leads into one of the more interesting parts of this is, you know, we're all entitled to our own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And that's the hard part, is agreeing on what's actually factual. And that's where we get into the issue with fake news and changing history. I'll bring this up again when we talked earlier, and I've got a couple climate stories to bring up, and one of them is a really good example of we can't agree on the facts. So how can you have the conversation?
Well, you can have the conversation, and that is one person says this is a fact, the other says something different is a fact. Great. You do your research, I'll do my research, we'll come back together. One of the ways of getting to the whole story is to begin to find what I call common ground.
Yeah, and that's
We,
problematic these days, Alan. And I'll give you a great example of this. One of the very first things you'll find when you're arguing against, you know, the militant leftists, and they've got all sorts of sites that are fact checker sites. They will argue about the quality of your source, so they
Mhm.
don't have to argue about the quality of the content. So I've been keeping bookmarks for years that agree with my point that come from their sources. You know, that's the thing about, you know, if you tell the truth, you never have to memorize it. You never have to remember anything.
Mhm.
Spinning the truth and lying, it'll always come back to haunt you. But the media, as dishonest as it is 90% based on truth, and they just spin the other 10%. So you can use their truth and their sources, and it's important we do this, because they will never. If I come up, if I use an article from Breitbart News, they won't even read it. They'll attack the source. They'll fact check it. They say, "Oh, these fact checkers have it rated as 5 Pinocchios." You never, you never even get off the ground. You've got to find a way to agree on the factual basis, and that's really what they do. They argue disingenuously. They will never argue the substance. They'll argue the source. So you have to come in there prepared for that, and have your sources lined up, the sources that they cannot debate. And if you can do that, then you can have the conversation. But they're really good at this stuff. They will not even engage if it comes from a source. Tucker Carlson, they'll ignore it. And the guy's one of the best investigative journalists out there. His team that does his research, they're first class. They're the best in the business.
How come we're not working for him?
I don't know. I don't think he can afford us.
Well, I'll cut my rate. So what did you have on climate?
Well, I got a fun one.
Okay.
That's exactly into this. And the title of this paper is, oh, by the way, 2023 was not the hottest year on record for over 70% of the world's population. So basically, they came out last year, you know, said 2023 was the hottest year ever. The NOAA said that. And U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration told us it was the hottest ever. But it doesn't apply to big parts of the world, including Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, Eastern North Pacific, the Hawaiian region, the Arctic, and the Antarctic.
So where does it apply?
Everywhere else.
Which is what?
They were well, I actually got the table of where it was hotter and where it wasn't.
Okay.
Africa had a very hot year.
Yeah.
Where else do we have a hot year? Some parts of South America, the Caribbean had a hot year, but the rest of the world no. But the world that didn't have the hottest year in history is where 73% of the world's population lives.
Wouldn't you think that if this was going to happen, it would happen globally, not
Well,
locally?
yeah, and here's where it gets interesting is 2023 had this natural phenomena. You may have heard of this called an El Nino,
Mm-hmm.
and the year where the records are being broken
Yeah.
that was 2016. And you know what happened that year?
You're gonna tell
Oh,
me.
there was an El Nino.
Okay.
Which basically, and that's a natural phenomena, if I'm not mistaken. It just happens every 5 to 8 years. And if that's the case, that completely debunks mankind's industrial output is the cause of quote unquote warming, even though we're not even calling it global warming anymore.
No, it's climate change.
Yeah, even though it's the exact same theory, exact same solutions
Right.
based on the exact same science, they just changed the title because the warming actually didn't happen. In fact, in non-El Nino years over the last 25 years,
Yeah.
we've actually had a downward trend in global temperatures, despite the urban heat sinks. So their entire, it just throws everything out the door once again.
In your studies on this topic, have you encountered anybody writing about the fact that we're in an interglacial time period in this ice age?
Well, I have, and that's why I agree with you when you go into detail on it.
Who's
But
been writing about that?
you get a lot of that on a website called What's Up With That,
Mhm.
WATTS upwiththat.com. They've mentioned that quite a bit over the last 20 years I've been reading that site.
But I'm talking about out in the big media. The, pe- the
No,
people,
not so much. Well, I don't read big media, Alan.
well, what the information you were just referring to about hottest year recorded and all that, those sources.
That was drawn from Daily Skeptic, who pulled an article off What's Up With That.
Okay.
That's where the studies came from. You're not going to see this in, what's big media? Fox News? That's corporate media too.
Yeah.
So
I
I
so
like
they
to
don't.
find the balance, so I try to avoid the corporate media.
Okay. Because I don't, when I hear these comments, I never hear about the fact that we're in an interglacial time period, which means we've been warming from, and I've seen different time year amounts from 12,500 to 18,000. But we've been warming for a long time. And why are we've been warming? Because it's what the sun does. No one ever talks about what the sun does. They just talk about CO2 and methane. Any other articles on climate you want to, or topics you want to deal with on climate?
Yeah, bear with me. I had one more queued up on this
Okay,
one. Oh, I want to share my screen on this one.
go right ahead.
So give me 1 second and I'll get that over to where it needs to be. There is a entity out there called the Center for Countering Digital Hate. So you know where this one's going.
Well, we don't like hate, of course.
Oh yeah, hate's bad. Let's fight hate. But how do you define hate? Or who defines hate is more important.
I'm going to define it, and it's anything I don't like.
Hate is what you don't like. Okay, that's probably not so you're going to be the arbiter for everybody?
Well, yeah, of course.
Well, I trust you.
I'm the most reasonable, sensible. How social media platforms and content producers profit by spreading new forms of climate denial.
Yeah, this is a pretty impressive report from the CCDH Quant Lab. Just who are these people?
I don't know.
The Center for Countering Digital Hate works to stop the spread of online hate and disinformation through innovative research, public campaigns, and public advocacy. Now, it sounds all pretty innocent, but what those terms actually mean gets really interesting. They talk about social media companies erode basic human rights and civil liberties by enabling the spread of online hate and disinformation. So in
So
this
wait a
case,
minute. So in this moment, are they equating both of those things?
Well, yes, anything they don't like is hate, and anything they don't agree with is disinformation.
There you go.
That's pretty much what it is. This report's pretty fascinating all the way through, but I'm going to fast forward to a really interesting graphic, which is right here. So they're talking about this. They've got this new study. They used artificial intelligence to pull up a whole bunch of YouTube videos, transcribe them, and break down the content of climate deniers
Mm-hmm.
or denier. And what they're saying is that climate deniers are moving from the old denial of global warming and its causes to a new denial of climate impacts, solutions, and the climate movement. So they're saying once upon a time we said global warming is not happening. Well, that's actually not what we said. We said man-made global warming isn't happening.
Right.
And the warming that we have seen is probably explainable by natural causes as well. Most of the people that are skeptics will admit that the greenhouse gas effect is scientifically accurate. It does exist. It does have an impact. It's just greatly exaggerated. It is not the control knob. Things like the sun is. So they've even got their definitions wrong. The second old denial is human-generated greenhouse gases are not causing global warming. As I just said, that's not true. We do understand that, hey, you put more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, it does have a very small warming effect. It is not zero. It's just not catastrophic. They're saying the new denial is that the impacts of global warming are beneficial or harmless. Well, that's an argument we've made on this show, Alan.
Yes.
I think just last week I brought up an article about that. And that's not denial. That's saying, where have you proven that a warmer atmosphere, a warmer climate is bad for humanity? And I
Helps
think
crops grow.
that's a good thing, isn't it?
For me, it is.
Well, either we eat crops or we eat things that eat crops. So that's more food good, but less food bad.
Right.
We're on the same page there, right?
Yes.
So they actually think that we're denying no, we're asking the question, why do you want a colder, why do you assume that, 1964 was the perfect temperature? Yeah. Warmer, humanity's thrived in warmer areas. We haven't done so well when you get when there's ice everywhere. And I can speak for that personally because I just had to slip through the ice all night in 15-degree weather tonight. I'd much prefer to have flip-flops. I don't have to worry about cracking my head on the pavement.
There you go.
Number 4, the new denial is that climate solutions won't work. Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty fair argument. We've made that argument. Some of the things, windmills kill birds, don't work in the cold, and don't work when the wind's not blowing. Solar panels don't work when they've got snow on them. Electric vehicles don't work in the cold. Can you give me a few more examples of that one?
Yes. How much energy is required to make things that you say are going to save us? How much energy is used, will be needed, and what sources is it coming from to deal with these items when they're no longer working? Can they be recycled? Are they toxic? The other is that, say, California. In a typical hot summer time period in California, or certain parts of California, we've had what's called brownouts, where you've got people going on the news or the media and saying, okay, during these time periods, don't use your air conditioner. During these time periods, don't do your washer, dryer, or whatever, because there's such a demand for electricity. Well, I'm not sure how the grid is improved in capacity over the years, but if you move more and more to electric, where's the power coming from? I haven't seen the detailed analysis of how much power is going to be needed as this change would, if this change took place, how much more power would be needed? Where is it being sourced? And do you have the capacity to deliver it, and at what cost? We're not getting that. So giving me a solution without being able to explain how it will be the solution is not a solution.
And so they're saying the new denial is saying that their solutions won't work. Well, it's because they don't. And the
Well,
bottom line is they think they appeal to emotion and make you think you must do something. And it doesn't matter if it works or not, as long as you're doing something and spending money, government money, they feel like it's helping. But it's a ridiculous scenario.
how about
There's
just
a comment.
how about just explaining what I just said? What's the cost? What's the time frame? How much do you need? And what's going to be the end results? We don't get any of that. We're just told do this. That to me is the problem. It's not a matter of being a denier. I don't deny climate change. Climate change has been changing since right after Let There Be Light. It's just that it's not what
Perhaps,
it's not what
perhaps even before that.
it's not what humans do. It's what the sun does. It's what the earth does.
Oh, you mean we actually work in a dynamic system with a lot of moving parts and separate and multiple inputs?
Well, what kind of climate would we have without the sun?
There would not be a climate, Alan, without the
Thank
sun.
you. Well, there would be. It would just be cold.
Well, no,
Uh,
because there wouldn't be a planet.
we got that too.
Yeah,
Uh,
that whole gravity thing seems to have held up pretty well over the centuries.
so to me, if you don't understand what the sun has done, is doing, is expected to do, you cannot really understand what's going on here. And I call that the heat generation factor. Then there's the heat reception factor. What's Mama Earth on her tilt? What's Mama Earth on her pathway around the sun? How is it changing? How does it affect how much heat is received or not received? That's the heat reception factor. We're not getting the discussion on these points, and that is my problem.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the thing we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes is how do you have these conversations? And apparently they don't want to have the conversations. They'd rather just say the science is settled and and basically subvert anybody who says differently. And that ties into something Big Lee said in chat a little bit ago.
Okay.
You talk about 98% of scientists that agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that was, I mean, I'm sure you've read this, but there was a survey done, I don't know, it was about 12, 15 years ago, where they pulled like 11,000 papers on climate change. And by very creatively and deceptively asking the question, do you support, the idea of CAGW, catastrophic anthropogenic global warming? Well, that's not how they asked the question. They asked the question deceptively so that 97% of these studies appeared not to deny it. And they've been running around saying all scientists agree, or 97% of scientists agree. But at the end of the day, it was only less than a couple hundred of 11,000 papers that they
Yeah.
reviewed actually supported the theory. And that's, you can't have a conversation with people like that. And, I got passionate about this whole topic in 2009 when ClimateGate happened. And for those of you not familiar, that's the University of East Anglia in England, which is a major climate research center. Somebody leaked or hacked or what have you, a bunch of the emails among a bunch of the leading quote unquote climate scientists from around the world, including the illustrious Michael Mann of the hockey stick theory, University of Pennsylvania, where these basically guys were talking about each other. How they weren't talking about the science, they were talking about the politics of climate change and how do you silence people that disagree with them. How can we keep these people from being published and being peer reviewed? And someone's peer reviewing this paper, we need to make sure we get the outcome we want. This is political manipulation. It wasn't science. When I read that, I go, okay, well, there's smoke, there's probably fire. And that's when I started deep diving into the whole climate topic, was 2009 with the ClimateGate emails. Scientists don't silence opposing opinions. That's the exact opposite of the scientific method. You release your data and have other people challenge it. That's how it can be replicated. And these people are doing the opposite. They are not scientists. They are politicians.
Politicians, opportunists, you name it.
Yeah.
Any more?
In some cases, it's propagandists. Let me finish up this paper.
Please
The
do.
fifth one.
Please
Yeah,
do.
the 0.5, the third of the new denial of climate is climate science and the climate movement are unreliable. Now, why in the world would we think that? Could it be the fact that every single one of their predictions it has not come true.
Did not happen.
Hmm.
Did and some of the ones that I know is that it was 2009 when Al, I think I invented the internet, Gore, said in an event in Denmark that within 5 to 7 years, all the ice, there's a 75% chance all the ice would be out of the Arctic in the summer. Did that happen?
Apparently not.
No, it did not.
In fact, I got a paper nearby. I could probably track it down. That shows that Arctic ice is at a new high, a cyclical high.
It's the highest in 15 years.
Yeah, and actually, the last time it was this high was 1966.
Another oddity is, and I've mentioned this before, Glacier National, which is a beautiful park in Montana, has glaciers. And at an overlook, they had a sign up that said by, let's say it was 2020, that the glacier was going to be gone. The glacier's still there, the sign's gone. Prediction didn't happen.
No, do you also remember with the polar bears were all going to be extinct by 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, the polar bear populations at record highs in northern Canada. And Time Magazine's cover, I'd love to bring this one up. Turns out that polar bears can actually swim. They like doing it.
What do you mean they can't? We all know they can swim.
Well, apparently we're supposed to feel sorry for this this noble beast who's out there fishing. Of course, we talked about that last week.
Well, they've been doing that for a long time. So
yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close out this page.
Okay.
We can move on from there, but
Yeah.
but it's a fascinating study of how they can, it's called counterhate.com, and they're talking about climate science. I don't hate anybody. I don't hate polar bears. I don't hate indigenous people that live on little islands. In fact, I like visiting them quite a bit. But I'm certainly not going to accept a bunch of BS thrown in my face that is propaganda given by multinational corporations who are spending all their energy trying to exploit and take over ownership of all our resources under the guise of climate crisis. Because that's what it's really
wait a
all
minute,
about.
no, they wouldn't do that, would they?
That's exactly what's going on. It's what we've been talking about the last few weeks.
What else? What else did you have on your list?
Well, we've talked the last couple of weeks about the NACs, the natural asset corporations, right?
Yes.
We
And
got a
for that,
victory, Alan. We got a big victory this week.
you told me. Go ahead, share.
Yeah, it turns out that the New York Stock Exchange pulled its application with the SEC to create the NACs. Let me pull up the article real quick.
And why would they do that?
Because sometimes activism works. People like us were talking about it. Yeah, let me pull up the article. The New York Stock Exchange drops the idea of investing in nature amid GOP backlash. Basically, the natural asset companies are dead on arrival. After reviewing feedback from regulators, market participants, and others, we have withdrawn our proposed rule filing to enable the listing of natural asset companies. For those who don't know, who haven't been on here the last couple of weeks, the New York Stock Exchange, along with some really nice people like the Rockefeller Foundation, we're trying to create a new shell vehicle where capital, basically you could invest, asset management companies could invest in a shell company that would then assume ownership or future profits of natural resources. The current global securities market's about $512 trillion. This was estimated to be a $4 quadrillion market. So that would have been 800% increase in the amount of ability to monetize something that, and they thought this is a crime that we've never monetized the air we breathe. And that's what they were trying to do. But we won that one for now. And that's a victory lap.
How about the 30 by 30?
30 by 30 is still on pace. They're still going for it. That hasn't been back. But look, the NACs were a big deal.
Yeah. 30 by 30 was coming from our good friends and buddies at World Economic Forum.
Mm-hmm.
And they have proposed this goal. The first 30 is related to 2030, the year. The second 30 is 30% of all the land and water on this planet should be under specific intergovernment control to protect it.
Why are you spreading disinformation like that just because they've actually put that in writing and proposed it in international bodies?
See,
Obviously-
I'm
obviously,
glad you brought that up because, again, I'm slow, so I need you to help me by defining what you mean by disinformation. Is that different than dat information, or what does that mean?
once again, misinformation is anything I disagree with. If it doesn't fit my narrative, it's misinformation, whether it's true or not.
So we're not interested in facts, we're interested in politicized agendas and narratives.
Well, pretty much, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's easy.
Yeah, objective facts are hard. You actually have to do homework, research, and have to, have an open mind and listen to other opinions.
And they don't always fit what you want.
Well, then if they don't fit what I want, it's misinformation.
Well, actually, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the next time someone says that's mis or disinformation, I'm going to have to ask, well, what are your agendas or objectives? So I understand what you think is misinformation. That's what I'm going to do.
And you know what it is if it really doesn't fit your objective? Well, then it becomes hate speech.
Is it hate speech or is it just racist?
Well, I think they go hand in hand. I mean,
Oh.
if you don't agree with my agenda, you're obviously a bigot. And everything that comes out of your mouth is probably hate speech. You probably should be deplatformed and canceled. Sooner or later, we'll have the resources to put you in the gulag. And I think that sounds very fair.
Now, gulags don't have spas, do they?
I don't know, but whatever gulag I end up in, I am calling top bunk. I want to carve my initials in there.
Yeah. You're assuming, of course, there will be a bunk.
Yeah, I watched Hogan's Heroes, so that's kind of that's my benevolent view
Yeah.
of what the gulag should be like.
Right. Any other topic?
No, that's pretty much what I brought to the table. I mean, we've got the big article I sent to you earlier, if you want to jump into that.
You start and I'll look. How about that?
Let me see if I can get there. I don't know. You were touching on the 14th Amendment earlier in Section 1. This one goes into Section 3 a little bit.
Okay.
Let me pull it up so that everybody can read it at the same time.
And I got it on my phone, so I'm going to read it. And the title of this is The Unexploded Bomb in the Constitution.
What's interesting is Doug and I did a
program
show
on this?
Friday, just the two of us, called "Can They Keep Trump Off the Ballot?" And I've had it up on my channel for about 48 hours now, and it's far and away breaking every record of any video I've ever put up there. We kept it at 1 hour, but we talked about a lot of things like insurrection, the real definition of it, definition of was secession legal, and we jumped into the 14th Amendment. Well, coincidentally, the Epoch Times this morning came out with an article called "The Unexploded Bomb in the Constitution That's Threatening the 2024 Election." They're talking about the history behind Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. I'm going to put this link in chat right now.
Okay.
Because you guys really want to read this. It's a very long article.
Do you want me to read Section 3 of the 14th Amendment?
Please.
Okay. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state. So that's defining who this is talking about. Under any state, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress, or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States. I'm going to stop right there. That really tells you what this is about, right, Brady?
Well, it does.
I mean, they've taken a lot of effort to let you know who this is addressed to. Now we get to what this is all about. No person, da da da, who shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So basically, it's saying if you've done some bad, as in engaged in insurrection or rebellion, you can't be any of these things. Is that the gist?
Well, yeah, but what's the interesting part, and this is what the Supreme Court's going to rule on in early February, is they specifically listed the offices, and when it came to the president and vice president, they didn't mention the president or vice president. They mentioned you can't be an elector for the president or vice president. And the assumption at the time was that the people of the United States, through the Electoral College, were going to vote for the president. And if somebody uh, didn't represent the best interests of the United States, they would not be elected. The people would be the ones who would adjudicate their eligibility or not. It was for the other offices they specifically listed. And that's one of the two major things that SCOTUS is going to rule on. Actually, there's three. The second one would be presidential immunity,
Mm-hmm.
which should be an easy case. And the third one is whether an insurrection actually took place. And I think that's a fascinating conversation. That's what a lot of what Doug and I talked about on Friday. And I'll give you a 30,000-foot view of it.
Can I read the first part again?
Yeah, go ahead.
No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress. Okay, we got that. These are actual political positions. Or elector of president and vice president. As you said, not the office, the elector of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who has previously taken an oath as member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution. So are you saying that this is directly about any position, civil or military, but not specifically addressed to the president and vice president?
It deliberately, specifically did not name those two offices.
Why do you think that's so?
Again, I think the debate that was going on at the time was that the people would decide those two positions on a national basis. And I think that's legitimate. But I think the bigger question here is, why did they want to put this article in there in the first place? And it was Holly, and that's what this Epoch Times article really goes into detail on, is why were they doing that? They were very concerned that the Southern Democrats would combine with the Northern Democrats to get a majority back in the House and the Senate, and basically strip down the rather vengeful, what was the word they used? Was it rebuilding of the South, the type of measures that the Northern Republicans are trying to put in place. But more importantly, if you want to read Article 4, Section 5, I think it's an important part of this conversation. Then I'll jump into the meat of it.
Okay, keep in mind the 14th Amendment was ratified July 9, 1868. What, 3 years after the Civil War ended?
Yeah, and it was debated for about 2 years.
Okay.
The problem was the Section 3 was the big issue.
What else do you want me to read?
Section 5.
This is pretty darn short. Section 5. Amendment 14, Section 5. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Now, they're calling it an article because every amendment is actually an amending article.
Yeah, and one of the funny things about it is the 14th Amendment was about 4 different amendments all thrown into one. And they did that on the same reason they do omnibus bills. They had to get them all in together. And it was the main gist of the 14th Amendment was to make sure that, newly freed Black citizens actually had standing, could vote, and had legal standing, and could own property. And to get that into place, they piggybacked some other really controversial issues in the amendment. Um, Probably should not have been passed as it was, nor should omnibus bills be passed. They should have been single item amendments, and that's why it took 2 years to get it passed. And there was a lot of debate over getting Section 3 passed, but Section 5 is very simple. Congress gets to determine what an insurrection is by making a bill, and they have. And what happened on January 6th most certainly was not an insurrection, and nobody has ever been proven guilty in court, or much less very few people have even been accused of insurrection. Donald Trump, who's the topic at hand here, was accused of insurrection in the proper court. That was impeachment, and he was acquitted in the Senate. And because he's acquitted in the Senate, presidential immunity kicks in. He cannot be tried for quote unquote insurrection in a court of law. That's where presidential immunity comes in. Had he been convicted in the Senate, then yeah, civil courts criminal courts could have gone after him, but he was not. And that you can't change those facts.
Well, let's get to some definitions so we understand what we're talking about with words. The definition I see for insurrection is a violent uprising against an authority or government. Violent against an authority or government. Was January 6th violent?
It was.
How was it violent?
Ashley Babbitt got shot by a police officer.
I would think
Roseanne Boylan got crushed by a fire extinguisher. She got killed. No police officers died that day, despite what the media told us.
I'm thinking of the people who showed up. Were they violent?
For the most part, 99% of them, no. There's a few people that are defendants on J6 that actually got into fisticuffs with the cops, and noted it was after the Capitol Police had fired rubber bullets and smoke bombs into the crowd, which was nonviolent before that. But yeah, there was violence. There was breaking of windows.
Yeah.
There was some pushing and shoving.
But
So you
was
can't
that
say-
but
can't
was
say there was no violence.
but was that to basically take over the government?
No, because I think every single person there that was a Trump supporter wanted to see the legislative process play out so that the electors could be questioned. And they obviously did not, that was not their goal, was to disrupt that. They wanted the process to happen.
But if you're intending to be violent, aren't you going to bring weapons with you?
Yeah, but we're not a very well-armed, oh, wait a minute, we are. We're the most well-armed civilian population in the history of mankind.
Right.
And we're to be told that we tried to stage an insurrection and overthrow the government and left our guns behind.
We did it with signs.
Yeah. Man, okay, well, we did have a guy with a buffalo hat on, you know.
With horns.
Yeah, the buffalo hat, that right there is violence.
Yeah. Now, in the beginning, very early on, this was also referred to as a coup. You remember that?
I do.
Okay. And one definition of coup is a sudden, violent, back to violent again, unlawful seizure of power from a government. That would be the seizure of power. Was power seized?
It was not, it was actually relinquished.
Well, then that would mean it wasn't a coup.
Sure it was, Alan. We actually wanted to overthrow the government, and yet the people in there at the Capitol on January 6th peacefully walked home after about 3 hours and just said, okay, I guess this isn't going to work. We're done. Just gave up. Sorry, we gave it a shot. We're done. That's what we're led to believe, that was the whole plot. We're that smart.
And
Here's
so if you disagree with that, then you're, of course, a climate change denier, right?
knock it off with your hate speech.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, where it gets interesting is taking a step back, and we're not going to go. I'm going to go and stop sharing the screen because I'm not going to go into the article.
Okay.
Now, but I wanted to make sure everyone saw that because it really talks about the history of the 14th Amendment. We could do this whole article and break it down for 2 hours if we wanted. 'cause it's
Okay.
well written and well researched. Um, where it gets fun is why did they put the language in there in the 14th Amendment in the first place? Why did they have to? It wasn't just for political reasons that they wanted to keep former Southerners out. In fact, I got some notes here I need to grab for this one.
Go right ahead.
It was very important for the North. And sorry, someone in chat helped me out. It was reconstruction was the word I was looking for. The Northern reconstruction plans for the South were, very ominous, and they wanted to make sure that was getting in place. But the question is, why did they have to have that language in the 14th Amendment? And the reason is they needed to codify the fact that secession was illegal, and that the North, the central government, Lincoln central government, actually acted in good faith and was doing it to quote unquote preserve the Union. And the only way you can make that case is if secession was illegal. Because if the South legally seceded, then it was a Northern invasion, or as what is
Northern
it
aggression.
like called the war to stop Southern independence.
Right.
So in the video Doug and I did a quick piece, and I'll give you the high level view of it.
Please.
What's the case for whether secession was legal or not? Well, I got about 5 or 6 points, and I'll go through them quickly, and you can jump in anytime.
Okay.
When we adopted the Constitution, every single state had to accede to the Constitution, which means adopt it. And if you can accede to something, you can secede by definition. And it's so crystal clear. And we've been talking about the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. They discuss this ad nauseum there and at the ratifying conventions. And specifically, New York, Rhode Island, and Virginia had it in writing that if they adopt the Constitution and ratify it, they do have the right to leave. And if one state has that right, all states have that right, because every state is equal under that contract. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first major point of whether secession was legal. The next one is where we know that secession was considered legal is in 1807, France and England, as usual, were fighting, and the British started confiscating United States ships and sailors and having them fight for them. It's conscription. This is a big problem for the colonies. And Jefferson, who's the president at the time, wanted to be very constitutional, and he finally got Congress to act. And instead of going to war with England, they created the 1807 Embargo Act, which basically stopped our trading with Europe. Now, the South, that went okay, but it basically put the New England into a recession. And so the New England states were very ticked off at Jefferson. They're not allowed, shipping is a big part of their trade. So they started talking about secession. What's the guy's name? A guy by the name of Tim Pickering held a number of conventions, ended in 1814, called the Hartford Convention, basically where they voted on whether to secede from the Union. They were going to join a couple of Canadian provinces and create a new country that was going to be closer ties to England. And did Pickering know what he was talking about? Well, I would think so. He was the adjunct general for Washington during the war. He served as Washington's Secretary of State and Secretary of War. He's one of the founding fathers. He knew what he was talking about. They voted not to secede in Massachusetts in 1814, but nobody there was ever accused of sedition or insurrection. It was assumed the states had that right. Pretty strong evidence that everyone understood that secession was something that was legal. Next bit of evidence I'd give you is when Lincoln got elected, and the election of 1860, I'll touch on. In fact, let me do that right now.
Okay.
You hear people talk, and Doug got this one wrong too on Friday when we were talking before our show, which was interesting because Doug gets his history right most of the time. But he said, yeah, there's precedent for keeping someone off the ballot. I go, really? He goes, yeah, in 1860, 10 southern states kept Lincoln off the ballot. Well, that didn't happen.
It did not happen.
It did not. So with the politics of the time, everybody voted by party platform, and the candidate was secondary. And what would happen in the 1860 election, there were 4 major parties that were vying for the election. You had the Southern Democrats, you had the Northern Democrats, the different names, and I can look them up for you and give you the exact names. You had the Republicans, and you had sort of a peace Republican Party that wanted to preserve the Union. Well, everybody knew that if the Republicans, meaning Lincoln, won the 1860 election, the South was going to secede. That was pretty much been discussed for 4 straight years. Well, the way elections were run back then is the states didn't print a ballot and give you 4 candidates. Each political party would print a ballot and send them out across the states. And because we did not have secret ballots, you get there in your town square and you pulled up your pink Republican ballot or your red Southern Democrat ballot. And that's how elections were done. And in 1860, it was so obvious that if the Republicans won that the South was going to secede, the Republican Party didn't even bother printing ballots in those 10 southern states. Nobody kept them off the ballot. Nobody suggested keeping them off the ballot. The Republican Party never even bothered printing them. That's a historical fact. And every time the media tells you there's precedent, they're lying to you again. Fun little bit of history. Now, where did I get that from? I've got a wonderful book here called The Election of 1860 by Michael F. Holt. One of the best 19th century historians out there, and it's got all source documents. He based that research on newspaper articles that he read from 1855 through 1861. You don't get better source documentation than that. So you can tell the media to go spin, because that is not true. Anyways, going back, so Lincoln gets elected, as we know, and before he was inaugurated, Congress 3 times tried to pass bills making secession illegal. Now, Alan, I got a question for you. Why would you pass a bill to make something illegal if it wasn't already illegal, or if it was already illegal? Doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. The last argument of why, and this really ties into why they put that language in the 14th Amendment. Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the South, the Confederacy, was never tried for treason. For 4 years, they talked about him being tried for treason, and they ended up dropping all the charges, and he never had to face a trial. And the reason they did that is they did not want to get the legality of the war, the Northern aggression or the invasion, ever to be adjudicated in a court of law. So that's my argument for why secession, or why that language is even in there in the first place. Because secession was legal.
Because if he was guilty of treason, then that means the secession was known to be wrong. But if you can't prove that doing that is wrong, illegal, in violation of the contract, then you can't be guilty of treason, because what he did was after they left.
Well, yeah.
There are, if you all out there can research this. I was looking briefly at one. The one you can start with is South Carolina's Declaration of Secession. They actually wrote down why in very clear language. They just one day go, we're done. No, they got together, they debated, they discussed it. Yes, they were slave states, and they didn't like the anti-slavery activity of the northern states. But read it. I still think that the whole thing could have been avoided.
Well, it could have been. And the Know Nothing Party was trying to avoid war. There was a number of parties, including Northern Democrats, that were trying to avoid the war.
And one way to avoid the war. Now, I'm reading a book right now. It's about a man named Cassius Marcellus Clay. You ever heard of him?
I know his brother, Muhammad Ali.
No, that would not be his brother. No. Cassius Marcellus Clay was around in the 1820s. That's who he got named after, possibly, but no. This is a white boy. Grew up in Kentucky. Again, check him out. And he came from a very wealthy family. They had slaves. He went to very elite private schools. The upshot is, for his time, he was a pretty big man. He was about 6 foot tall. Not a pushover. And for various reasons, when he came back, and his father had passed and he got the plantation, he freed the slaves. He was an absolute out there abolitionist in Kentucky. This didn't play well with people. More than once, groups of people tried to kill him. They didn't get it done. So you had people out there, even in those areas, that they were actually working for something called, well, it wasn't an immediate emancipation. It was more a gradual, because in the way what I understand from this is that you have to prepare these people. You have to educate them to get ready for what's coming. You just don't free them, and they don't have the education, they don't have the training, etc. So he was definitely an advocate for emancipation, and his life was threatened many times because of it.
It brings up an interesting point, which I touched on with a longer video. The political parties in the 1800s, they had platforms like everything else. The Republican platform for the 1860 election had nothing to do with ending slavery, but rather it was basically to crack down on very legitimate Southern slaveholder tyranny. The Southern states, what they called slave power, Buchanan's government was very corrupt. And the big fight of the time was the new colonies, or the new states. Would they be slave states or free states? And that's what they were really fighting over.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it comes down to what's called Bloody Kansas. And Buchanan's, I think it's Buchanan. I may have the president wrong. I've got too much history floating in my head. But bottom line is the Southern Democrats were corrupt as all hell. So that was a legitimate platform. But so that was the platform of the Republican Party, was to basically be a pushback against Southern tyranny and Southern corruption. It did not run on the platform of ending slavery whatsoever. That was something that was discussed and recognized that it could not be done in the existing slave states. They wanted to stop the further entry into the Union of new slave states. That was the big issue at the time.
Well, California came in as a free state in 1850.
Mm-hmm.
I think Lincoln's main goal was to keep, legal or not, constitutional or not, his thing was keep the Union together. But what would have happened because people in the slave states, they looked at these other human beings as property that they had paid for, whatever. What would have happened if the North had said, okay, what's the fair price on everybody? We'll make the payment. We'll pay you for your property. What would have happened?
Well, who would be paying that?
Well, the North would eventually, yes.
Well, you got to look at the tax base at the time. One of the bigger reasons Lincoln had to preserve, quote unquote, preserve the Union, although he did anything but that, was because a huge part of the tax base was about to disappear. Now, Lincoln's financial benefactors were the Northern industrialists who would become the robber barons, basically modern day mercantilists, same people that were backing Hamilton, 80 years earlier. And the core functionality of mercantilism is for the corporations and businesses closer to the seat of government get all kinds of government handouts. They talk about protective tariffs, air quotes around protective. They talk about internal improvements, which are basically government contracts. In Hamilton's day, that was building canals, and Lincoln's day was building railroads. These were the people who had a financial interest in Lincoln being president and the Republican Party. Always follow the money. Well, if you're losing, over 50% of your tax base, how are you going to fund these internal improvements? And the answer is you're not.
Well,
That's why they had to preserve the Union for financial reasons.
Going into the Civil War, apparently Lincoln went to New York to find out what it's going to cost to borrow to fight this war. And the bankers were very greedy and gave him a very high interest rate.
Yeah, it was over 30%.
Yeah. So Lincoln went back to DC and took a friend's advice and created the greenback. They created the money. This really pissed off the bankers because they weren't borrowing. We're not borrowing. And after the war, Lincoln liked the outcome so much that he decided he was going to keep it going. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he was, let's say, eliminated. Had you heard that?
Yeah, I knew all about the financial deal. I talked about that in a video I did 2 years ago.
Okay.
About how Lincoln had to borrow at 30%, and therefore he started basically created a fiat currency called the greenback. What happened after the war was there was the next 3 decades, one of the major political issues was the nature of our currency. Would it be silver-backed, gold-backed, or what have you? We're going to have to do a show on this one of these days, Alan. It's been a while since I did the homework on it,
Uh-huh.
but it's a big part of the story of the 19th century, what you're touching on.
In what way?
Well, most of the political contests for the next 3 decades, including the rise of the populism and everything like that, had to do with whether we had a viable currency. What was it backed by?
Mm-hmm.
Was it specie? The greenback was just fiat currency. They got them through the Civil War, but there was a lot of issues with it. I mean, we don't have time to do justice on that conversation tonight, but it's a conversation we really ought to dive into. And I've got some research on it that I'm
Okay.
rusty on. But if you want to bring it up for a future show, I'm all over that conversation.
Well, tell me, okay, the Civil War began in 1860, right?
61 actually, right?
61. Okay, I had to find my sheet. I'm looking at the records from the U.S. Treasury. 1861 to 1865, right?
Yep.
Well, at 1860, and this is at the end of the fiscal year, the U.S. government owed 90, just gonna round numbers, $90 million. By 1863, it was 1.1 billion. 1864, 1.8, and 1865, 2.6 billion. 1866, 2.7. For the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. For the next 8 years, the national debt decreased. Not by a lot, but it continued to decrease. Oh, just gives you an idea of, the government was borrowing for something. Any more comments in the chat?
Yeah, quite a few good ones.
Oh, please bring them.
A lot of comments that we didn't learn this in school. Of course not. You learn in school that Abraham Lincoln was this great savior of the Union. Probably not the case. He did preserve a union. He basically also ended states' rights altogether. We were supposed to have independent sovereign states. Those are gone, and they have been. So we call that guy a hero. I don't know. I thought the Constitution mattered once upon a time.
Is that why Doug doesn't like him?
Among other reasons. Now, the other interesting part of, I was talking about the money, and just to finish it off, the internal improvements with the railroads at the time. And that means you need the steel industry, the banking industry, and the railroad industry to all receive all kinds of government subsidies. And the people, the mercantilists, these are the people who backed the Republican Party, a bunch of New York Wall Streeters. And now you have the robber barons who came out of it. And you had the greatest wealth disparity in the history of the country happened as they were doing those next 30 years were known as the Gilded Age. That's what we got from single party rule for 3 or 4 decades. When people use the term rhino, Republican name only, I kind of laugh because those are the rhinos that would have fit in great in Lincoln's Republican Party. People we call rhinos today, no, Republican Party, they want to keep the myth that they call them Straussian Republicans. Strauss was a big 20th century historian, a revisionist historian, who makes it seem like Lincoln and the Republican Party were all good and Democrats were all bad. And of course, anytime you talk in absolutes like that, you're going to be making historical mistakes. It's certainly not the case. but the results of it was great wealth disparity. The robber barons who grew into the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, people like that, who basically have owned our governments for the last 100+ years. So that's the result of single party rule. And so if you love your Republican Party and think it once stood for something great, I'd suggest you rethink it. Don't get me started on the Democrat Party because I think it's worse. But
Maybe this is why the founders did not like parties to begin with.
Or factions whatsoever.
Yeah.
I am going to post the link to the video Doug and I did on this subject. It's a longer version. We hit on a lot of stuff really quickly.
Cool.
Like I said, I've never had a video go up on my channel to get so many views so quickly. Please add.
You got
to it.
35 views?
No, we're over like 1,300 now in 2 days.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, I don't know if somebody's out there sharing it. So, because that's more that I've got more views than I have followers, and that's kind of hard to do.
Super.
Yeah, we're at now. How many views do we have now? I'll tell you right now.
Tell me.
1,296. Which, to give an example, I've been posting the For the Republics, and we're averaging 500-600 views a week.
Well, that's pretty nice. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, no, we're doing good on the For the Republics. I mean, that's like double what it was 3 months ago. So that part of the audience is growing.
Cool. So what's in chat?
No, I've been too busy talking to read. And the chat's going really fast tonight. Oh, Scott D12. Yeah, that's a great point. The gesture of friendship between the Russians and USA to keep the Brits at bay. Yeah, that's a fun conversation. The Russian Navy actually did a great thing during the Civil War, keeping the Brits out of it, by both on the Atlantic and the Pacific coast, to be honest with you. Yeah, the Russians were our friends a number of times during the first couple hundred years of our existence.
Cool.
That's a great point.
Anything else?
I don't know. It's like I said, chat's going really fast. All right. So Bill West says the United States had war debts from the Revolution and the War of 1812, as well as no uniform way to collect revenue. So Bill, there's an interesting take on this. In 1811, we had chosen not to renew the First Bank of the United States, his 20-year charter. Hamilton's Bank of 1791 expired in 1811. Rothschild famously said, "If we do not renew if they do not renew the bank's charter, I project a major war." The War of 1812 breaks out. The United States has to borrow money to fight the war. By 1815, Congress realized the only way they're going to be able to pay for their war against the Brits, which is basically a stalemate, was to create the Second Bank of the United States. So the bankers won that. We didn't renew the charter in 1811. By 1815, we had no choice but to renew a second charter, Bank of the United States, to cover the war debt. So that's a fascinating story, Bill. Thank you for bringing that up.
And what happened to the second U.S. bank?
Andrew Jackson took care of that one.
He did it. It was the guy running it wasn't able to. I'm blanking on his name. Wasn't able to renew the charter. And Andrew Jackson, I'm no necessarily fan of his, but I do like this one part. And he referred to the second U.S. bank as a hydra-headed monster eating the flesh of the common man.
Among other things, he's got some great quotes about that. I've got a bunch of them written down, but not at my fingertips right now. And of course, they did try to assassinate Jackson as well.
Well, he did have to face an assassin. It was in the Capitol, and the person who tried to kill him had 2 pistols. They apparently were known to misfire in damp air. Both misfired. It's possible this guy was a little crazy too, out of work painter. Anyway, both pistols misfired, and Jackson took him out with his cane.
Well, Andrew Jackson was a legitimate war hero from the War of 1812.
Yes.
Legitimate. He was actually a great commander, a great general. Was it Colonel? No, it was a Colonel. It was a Colonel Jackson. Anyways, he was a great. I read about this when I was much younger, and it may have not been the best book. It may have been official history, but everything I read about him as a military commander was pretty good.
And he had an interesting nickname, didn't he?
Stonewall. Alan, Mr. 2020 Liberty comes up with the name you were looking for, Nicholas Biddle. the
Yes,
second
thank you.
chairman. Thank
Yes.
you. 2020 Liberty. That is correct. And Nicholas Biddle had some great quotes about how he was actually thought he was more powerful than the president of the United States.
Well, wanted to be.
He certainly was threatening. He certainly was threatening Jackson. Now, Jackson was also, started the quote unquote Democrat Party. Well, not quote unquote, it was the Democrat Party. By the way, I hate when people call it Democratic Party. No, it's a Democrat Party. Don't get the two terms mixed up. Everyone goes around calling the United States a democracy. Well, democracy is a democracy is a noun, is it not? Democratic is a process that's a verb, or it's an adverb. Describes something, an adjective, I guess.
Either way, it's dirty.
Well, no, the bottom line is that, the Constitution does describe some democratic processes, but it most certainly never describes a democracy, which is a distinct form of government that they specifically wanted to avoid. And the Democrat Party is no more democratic than the Republican Party has anything to do with a republic. The Republican Party was a nationalist party. The Federalists weren't about federalism, they were nationalists too. Don't take a name and think it means what they think it means. The anti-federalists were the actual Federalists. And Jefferson's Democratic Republicans were actually Federalists too, but they opposed the Federalist Party. So, go figure.
All right, Andrew Jackson. Like, just to make sure we get this right, he was a major general in the regular army of the United States. He fought at the Battle of New Orleans. And that's what I was thinking his nickname was, and it is Old Hickory.
Someone already posted that in chat to beat you to
Okay.
it.
Well, I can't be that fast. Come on. Anyway, that's so he was not a colonel, he was a major general. Battle experience. Well, we have less than 10 minutes to go. Anything on the chat or anything else you want to talk about?
I got a couple of people having a discussion about flat Earth, but I think we can skip past that one.
Yes.
Actually, I saw a really good video on flat Earth where one of the bigger proponents came on board with a scientific skeptic on that, and the flat earther made the best flat Earth arguments he could, and got torn himself a new one. Personally, no offense to you people who think we're on a flat Earth, I don't think it holds up to scientific scrutiny. And this is
Well, let me ask you this. Do we have the reasonable ability to view other things in our solar system from this planet? Yes or no?
that's probably a yes. We've got these things called telescopes.
Okay. When something is viewed, has it been determined to be round or flat?
Everything that I've seen seems that the other planetary bottles are spherical.
Okay. Like the moon.
Definitely round-ish.
Okay. Then so we would be the only flat thing in the solar system.
RWB's laughing at us, Alan, saying
Okay.
the chat got us off topic.
Okay, well, let's go back to topic.
That's funny. And RWB is one of our local San Diego buddies.
Beautiful.
Anyways, well, I guess it's time we can tell everybody where to find us.
Well, you take your time to do that. Go right ahead.
You can, my main channel, most of my content, my good stuff is on Rumble at war_hamster. Been putting out starting to put out more content, and the channel's growing. You can find me on Twitter at war_hamster1776. Make sure you look for the 1776. There is another war hamster running around Twitter, and he's not a bad guy, but he's still not the original.
He's not you.
He's not me. A lot of people get us mistaken, and it's I may have to, I don't know. people are saying he should give him some kind of trademark violation or whatever. I don't know if I want to play that game. Like I said, he seems like a good guy.
Well, what hamster is he having behind him?
He's got some other little icons. They look like, rather, vicious hamsters, and I'll
Okay,
give him a little bit of credit. I've
okay.
got a much deeper library because I've got a lot of my subscribers and followers have been giving me hamster memes for the last 3 years. I've got a whole library of them. I've got like 30 or 40 war hamsters I can put behind me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you've only seen some of them. Wait till Valentine's Day when I break out the love hamster. That's a good one. And the other place to find me on Truth Social is war_hamster. Um, I'm on Gab Getter and a few other places, but most of the stuff I put out are in those 3 places.
Well, thank
And
you.
coming very, very soon, I will be launching my Substack, and I'll make the announcement here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I am, of course, here with Brady and usually Doug, Fed Patriot Soapbox for the Republic, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time. And for people who are watching this after the fact, keep in mind you can watch us live on Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time, Patriot Soapbox. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Saturdays, you can find us on the radio. Easier to find it on the computer than actually trying to find it on a dial, unless you're in Southern California. KMET 1490 AM. It's 1 to 3 p.m. West Coast time. Go to the KMET 1490 AM website, look for Listen Now, and we're there. It's called Constitution Radio. It's Douglas V. Gibbs Show. I'm a regular guest, sometimes the surprise host. And then for my work, which got to work a little bit harder on the website, FedEd, FEDED.us, or Basic Monetary System Education. That's all I got. Anything else you want to chat about?
Oh, I got a couple things queued up.
Give me one, please.
Well, it's not going to be a short one, but the U.S. Supreme Court's going to that big rule. They're going to hear what they're going to talk about is really going to impact a lot of the J6 defendants, and I know that's near and dear to everyone's heart. But it looks like if they're unable to get this Rule 1512, or if that gets overturned, that whole rule was put into place during Sarbanes-Oxley, basically the post-Enron period, where they were trying to make sure you couldn't basically alter documents or what have you in the middle of a official proceeding. And they're trying to
Wait a minute. You have to have a rule for that?
apparently. That being said, it's very unlikely that these 1512 accusations are going to hold up under the Supreme Court. I'm assuming. I've read the arguments, and they're pretty darn weak for the government's case on that.
What were the accusations?
Well, this is basically, the law that they're talking about, 1512. Again, it was about post-Enron.
Right.
They're basically saying that if you disrupted a congressional hearing, that it falls under 1512. And if you read 1512, it has nothing to do with disrupting any kind of official proceeding. It had to do with falsifying documents and financial crimes. The vast majority of the sentence time for the J6 defendants has been based around 1512. So if the Supreme Court comes back with what we would call the correct ruling on that, you have an awful lot of egg on the face of the DOJ for charging it in the first place. And I would imagine there's going to be some kind of, you're going to get a lot of people let out of jail a lot earlier, which is nice. I mean, prayers for those people. But also, I think they might actually have some kind of financial remuneration coming their direction. Because
false imprisonment, false incarceration.
Oh, it's this is a big freaking deal. It's Supreme Court. These are lawyers who went to law schools, and so you can't predict what they're going to do. This is DC, but the case seems to be pretty cut and dried.
Crazy. It's just very sad that, or shows a very desperate act that we will use a lot. Go ahead.
We've had 3 periods in history, Alan, where the central government basically decided to ignore the Bill of Rights and suspend habeas corpus, and all kinds of, rights to due process. The first was 1798 with the Aliens and Sedition Act.
Wasn't that John Adams?
Well, it was Adams was the president, but it was Hamilton's Federalist Party doing it. They were nationalists. We saw it happen during the Civil War under the nationalist Abraham Lincoln, and we're seeing it under the Biden regime, where we have unprecedented censorship and jailing of political opponents. It's 3 times in history that this has happened, and they've all been dark days for this, these United States of America, and the freedoms and individual liberty that we love and believe in. We're living through one of the 3 darkest times in American history.
Going back to we got 1 more minute. Going back to John Adams and him supporting that, do you think that was part of why Adams and Jefferson stopped communicating, being friends?
Well, I think that's a huge part of it. I think that probably started even before the Alien and Sedition Act.
Mm-hmm.
But that story has a happy ending, thanks to Abigail. For those who don't know, Abigail Adams stayed in contact with Thomas for 13 years. Thomas Jefferson and Adams stopped speaking, and then Abigail Adams got them back in touch. They ended up becoming lifelong friends from about 1807 and on, and they died
July 4th.
July 4th, 1926, 50-year anniversary. Is that
18.
right? 18. Right, 1826 on the same day, both of them.
Who went first?
Adams, I believe.
Jefferson.
Jefferson went first?
Jefferson was first.
Yeah, died on the same day. That's one of the great coincidences of history. And if anybody's ever seen the John Adams special on HBO, it appears to be mostly historically accurate. I enjoyed that one quite a bit.
Yeah.
They need to make one of those on Jefferson, but they'll never do it.
Why?
Because he's anti-central state. That's the anti-narrative. You will always be spun impolitely if you're not on the nationalist side of history.
It's amazing that they reconciled.
And they make Broadway plays about Hamilton.
Well, 1. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for being on, Brady.
No, I'm sorry I was late, but it was a fun show. I enjoyed it, Alan. Well,
I enjoy you being here. Thank you for making it. Hope Doug can be here next week. That would be great.
Yeah, great chat tonight. I mean, it was so fast I couldn't keep up with it, but it's great to see the participation. Some good comments.
Was chat going so fast because we were so boring?
You make the call.
I don't know. I'm half asleep most of the time. So anyway, I see Chris is here with her lovely necklace. That's a fantastic necklace.
I wear it just for you.
Yes, you do.
How are you guys doing?
Good. I'll finish up.
Chris.
Okay.
Alan Myers here. This has been another episode of For the Republic. Thank you for being here. And to all you good people out there, you lovers and defenders of liberty, freedom, rights, individuality, equality of opportunity for all, to all you patriots, yeah, you know who you are. Till next time, may you be and stay safe and well. Patriot out. Chris, how you doing? Brady, thank you so much. You gonna have Kath tonight?
Nope, she needs some prayers yet. She's still got some pain from her teeth. She's had some work done, and
Really? Oh, give her our best.